Bluffs and their adopted daughter are caught in red tape. Healthcare benefits for the child could be in jeopardy.
The parents are concerned because the toddler has severe special needs. Mike McKnight brings us the 6 on Your Side investigation.
Oh, you want to swing. Ooh.
Instead of the emotional swings of growing up in foster care, 2 special needs children have the steady love and care of adoptive parents.
I have cerebral palsy, so I've always lived with disability myself, so it didn't scare me.
But the couple is worried about a legal name game after they changed the name of their youngest, born in South Dakota.
The birth certificate does not read Maria Jacinta Sol Alexa Post. That is where the rub is, which they are stonewalling us on.
So the little girl has 2 different names in 2 states.
Absolutely, she's caught in the middle.
Possibly creating one big issue with Medicaid benefits.
We have an inaccurate birth certificate that doesn't list the correct name for her. So nothing comes back to her name. We will lose her Medicaid, we will lose her disability subsidy, and we will lose access to her therapy services.
So Landon submitted a request to correct the birth certificate in South Dakota.
But the couple received notice from the state of South Dakota the child's complete name can't be changed on the birth certificate without an amended court order from the state of Iowa.
They hired attorney Norm Springer, who in 42 years of practice has finalized 1,000 adoptions.
I've never had to put that language in any of my decrees, that ordering that the birth certificate be amended to reflect a new name. Every state I've ever worked with before just did it.
South Dakota Vital Records Office says a court order must direct a vital record be amended and provide information to identify the birth certificate, list the incorrect data on it, and correct data as it should appear.
I refer to this as government bureaucracy at its highest level of ridiculousness.
The couple is paying $1,500 in unexpected legal fees.
You shouldn't have to hire a lawyer to get a birth certificate amended when it's plainly obvious that her name has been legally changed. We're not pulling the wool over anybody's eye. There's no other party to this.
She is 14 months.
The couple never expected the financial or emotional cost of having official records show the name they gave their adopted daughter.
Maria Jacinta.
On Your Side in Council Bluffs, Mike McKnight, 6 News.
It's a beautiful name. The adoption attorney tells Mike he obtained an order from a judge in Iowa to amend the South Dakota birth certificate. The couple sent that order to Vital Records, and they're waiting to hear if that will make their daughter's name change.